Hey everybody, it's Mark Arnstein at Remax Hallmark and livingnorthtoronto.com. This is the Mark Arnstein Show, episode number 9. And I'm here with my very good guest, Mr. Barry McCullough from Greybrook Real Estate in Yorkville and Toronto. Just give a quick background about Barry. He works in a private capital market group. He's responsible for building and managing relationships with investors associated with some of Greybrook's key channel partners and works closely with management on strategic initiatives. Barry has over 12 years of experience in the investment management industry, mostly recently with TD Asset Management, where he worked closely with portfolio managers across the country, serving high net worth individuals, foundations, and institutional clients. He holds an MBA from Rotman School of Management and University of Toronto. My nephew is actually there right now, and specializing in real estate. Barry is registered dealing representative of Greybrook Securities Inc. and exempt market dealer registered in Ontario and certain other provinces. Related to Greybrook Realty Partners, he's also a cross-market registered representative with Tanja Capital Partners, LLC, in the U.S. and registered with broker-dealer with the SEC and a member of FNRA and SIPC. Barry, thank you very much for being here. I know that was a lot of letters and numbers thrown out there, so cool.
Obviously, the lawyers got a hold of that intro, it sounds like.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, 100%. So thank you for coming on today. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So tell me quickly, so you went from TD to Greybrook. So what was the transition there and why make the move?
Yeah, it really, it was a number of years ago with TD, and kind of I'll step back a bit and started my career actually with TD Ameritrade back in 2008. So it was September or fall of 2008 when I became a licensed stockbroker. So really kind of feet first into the fire for those that remember, I guess back in September 2008 specifically. Kind of the depth of the financial crisis. So that was really the baptism by fire entry into the financial markets for me.
Fun, huh?
Yeah, thrilling. So really learned fast. From there, I kind of gravitated towards a bit more of a Canadian focused role with TD Asset Management, and then kind of looked into my next kind of career step. And really, it was almost a kind of a fortuitous connection where one of my family connections that I had kind of kept in contact with over the years, they were kind of recruited into Greybrook as their new president and COO. I sort of kept in contact with Chris over the years, and let him know that I was sort of looking for a bit of a change. And Greybrook was a bit different, coming from TD, where you're one of several thousand employees to one. I think I was probably number 30 at the time, back in 2016 when I joined Greybrook. So definitely big change in feel and culture and sort of pace of work. But it's been a great experience so far, and really wouldn't change a thing.
Cool, awesome. And now, what you guys do a lot of is investing into real estate, large projects that a lot of like the common folk, let's say, wouldn't normally necessarily have access to. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So that's really kind of how Greybrook sort of started and evolved. Was initially back in the early 2000s, kind of investing kind of our firm capital, so on a proprietary basis, just with local developers, really being equity partners with them. Also within the firm, we were investing in other things like technology and logistics and healthcare and so forth. So a bunch of different industries and asset classes, and really sort of found that the real estate investments were the most successful and most predictable or repeatable.
Right.
We gravitated towards that to the point where initially we expanded that to friends and family investing alongside the firm, and really as an equity partner with top developers in the GTA. Investing for the share of the profits from the project upon completion. And around 2008, 2009, sort of expanded to our kind of current format, where now we work with eligible and accredited investors across Canada, the US, and about 30 other countries as a registered investment dealer. And really it allows investors to kind of gain high quality exposure into real estate on the manufacturing side, where a lot of people historically haven't been able to access. A lot of people are obviously familiar with buying, a pre-construction home or an investment property for, more for an income play. But for us, it's really coming in at day zero as part of that, acquisition and development or manufacturing of, whether it's a high-rise condo, it could be large master plan subdivision, an infill townhome development, and our investors are basically benefiting in the profits that are generated from that.
Right. So you're not actually owning any actual physical real estate in the sense you're help funding the development of the project and then getting the rewards at the end from once the project's actually sold off.
Yeah. The capital that we raise from our investors is really, goes towards purchasing the land, right? So we'll have Greybrook investors, our developer that we'll work with on a given project would have their equity contribution as well. So together we would be the landowners of the project and would take that through a development program, all the way through to final home occupancies. At that point, when people are taking getting the keys and taking over occupancy of their homes, that's when we're capturing really the balance of all our revenues and profits as a development group. And that's when we're in a position to then in turn split that with our investors.
Cool. And then how many people typically do you bring in on one investment, or does it just really vary depending on the scope and the size of it?
It typically varies. Really kind of depends primarily on how large the investment offering is. If it's a smaller, $10 or $12 million equity raise, that could be a couple hundred investors at most. We've had some last year that were in the $60 or $70 million range, and that would be probably 1,000 plus investors.
Right.
But it's that would be, I would say, the primary determinant is really how large the offering size is. The average investment amount tends to stay rather similar because we really focus on, not just looking at, hey, Mark, here's one particular opportunity, but looking at what you would consider investing in this strategy overall. And then from there saying, okay, let's build a portfolio for you, right? Maybe in this project, we'll look at doing a high-rise development in the downtown core, maybe save some of your investment capacity for, a low-rise project with a different partner or some exposure on the multifamily asset class in the U.S. So that's really the focus that we have is, while we would be a smaller portion of an individual's overall investments, still within Greybrook, looking to diversify people across, different asset classes, different project timelines, different submarkets, and so forth.
Okay, cool, interesting. So typically, I'm assuming there's got to be a minimum requirement to get into on these projects. Are we allowed to talk about that, or is that no?
Yeah, no, we can talk about that. I mean, investors in Canada and Ontario, we're registered across the country. Typically, there's a minimum income or asset requirements for investors. It's typically either $75,000 in personal income or $125,000 combined with a spouse, or net worth in excess of $400,000. That's sort of at a high level, kind of the qualification requirements that the OSC and the other various provincial regulators have. From our perspective, I mean, we're all of us here are licensed dealing reps to work with investors. We'll go through your typical kind of know your client intake just to kind of understand an investor's financial position, their objectives, their risk tolerance, and so forth. Not just to see that they're qualified necessarily for the investment, but also to make sure that it's a suitable investment for them, given those things that I mentioned. On any given project, the minimum investment amount is $25,000. Really, we kind of keep it at that level versus $50,000 or $100,000. Just to my earlier point, it's easier to build a diversified portfolio if you're allocating sort of $25,000 at a time versus sort of larger ticket amounts.
Right. And right now, so I got two questions that I'm going to fire at you right off the bat. One, are you seeing more better returns with doing stuff here locally or versus the States? And then second question, I'll let you answer that one. I'll give you the second question.
Sure. I would say it depends a little bit on, well, it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison for the first part, primarily because our focus in the US is a bit more refined around kind of multifamily or mixed use development. So part of we call our Society Living platform that we're doing with a partner called Property Markets Group in the US. It really looks at acquiring and developing primarily rental type of assets. So your risk return profile is a little bit different, I would say. Not necessarily have the potential to hit a grand slam like you would in a development here. Your downside might be a bit better insulated for the reason that it's a rental asset. Our exit in a project like that is to build the building, take it through a leasing program so it's stabilized and leased up, and then from there market it through a network of brokers to primarily institutional buyers. Now, let's say if we're trying to sell an asset and it's March 2020, Obviously, with COVID being a time of great uncertainty, we probably wouldn't list anything, right? It just means that you would hold on to that asset if it's another 6 months or a year or 2 years until the conditions for the sale are good. Then we would do it then. But it kind of has a nice sort of embedded option that I like, where because it's a rental asset, if we're not selling it right away, you can just hold on to it for income in that kind of interim period. Now in Canada, we don't really have a focus on a multifamily. It's really for sale, condo or ground related housing.
Right.
So I would say you have a bit better torque to kind of home prices and sort of natural market appreciation. Your exit is, you're pre-selling, whether it's a townhome or a condo, and you're kind of selling through that construction phase as well. So it's kind of self-liquidating in a sense. So I'd say the returns tend to be, if you're kind of accounting for risk, approximately similar. We tend to target about 20% kind of annual return to our investors over an average project time frame of roughly 5 years or so.
Right. Okay. And then if you go in, as I say here, if you go in on investment like locally, do you get the ability to kind of double dip in the sense where you could invest in it to help finance the project, but then also potentially buy a unit like pre-sale kind of thing?
We do. Yeah. It's really kind of a perk that we try to offer to our investors. A lot of people would like the returns from an investment perspective, but they might also have an interest to, eventually purchase a townhome or a condo in that development, whether it's for their own use or maybe for their kids down the road,
right,
or as an investment property.
Right.
So really what happens is once we get through our planning and approvals of work with the city, and we're kind of getting ready to launch sales for that particular project, we'll have essentially a Greybrook Friends and Family event to kind of, introduce investors to the actual project itself in terms of price lists and floor plans and so forth. So it's definitely a perk that we offer investors, and it's been pretty popular.
For sure. Because one of the biggest things, I know obviously you've done interviews with Jazz Sakar, for our followers who are watching along and know who he is. He was our very first ever podcast that we did with. But, we harp and talk about all the time about how to build generational wealth. And so this obviously would be, to get in a relationship with you and your company, your organization is such a great segue into doing all of this, which is why I wanted to have you on today. Because not only because you do it as an investment with, your minimum, like say $25,000 to get involved, but then you got that buying opportunity where you can then also own an asset at the end, then to be able to go and rent it out because you're getting in at the beginning stages, you got a lot of upside down the road with the growth of the market and everything else that's happening out there in our crazy Toronto real estate market. So that's just, I think it's just like a fantastic opportunity. So the other part of my question is, how does it work if you're going to say, because you go through your RSPs, or if you're like, say, someone like me, who's a real estate agent who happens to be watching this, listening around, if you're incorporated, can you invest through your PREC? You
can. Yep. So any product that we do is open for non-registered funds, obviously sort of as a default option, whether that's personally in your name, Mark, or through a corporation. Really, it's just, we kind of treat it as almost like a look-through entity. So we kind of look at who the owners of the corp or the PREC are. And then from there, we just sort of qualify the investor on that basis.
Right.
But yeah, it's a very popular vehicle for our investors to use. So whether it's a medical professional corp that some investors would have, or in your world, private real estate corps, certainly possible for sure.
Okay. And then what about RSPs?
RSPs as well. There are rare occasions where they're not, I would say, becoming exceedingly rare, maybe 1 in 20 products that we do. And really, it's just, to my earlier point, if the project size is just too small to make it sort of viable, given the number of investors that we would have, because there's typically, for it to be an RSP eligible investment, you need to have a certain minimum of Canadian investors. Usually we're many multiples of that number. But once you get to smaller offering sizes, we don't really want to risk anything becoming ineligible for RSP. So very long-winded way of saying 99% of the time it's RSP eligible as well. TFSAs, LIRAs, RES, right. Any kind of registered plans.
Cool. Oh, that's amazing, because that's such a great way to, again, because obviously everyone has different risk tolerances to what's going on in investing. I'm obviously a big real estate agent, so I believe in investing in real estate as opposed to a lot of the other stuff, but I still have it because I think you have to keep yourself a little bit diversified. But if someone, kind of like, work with what you know and do what you know, and this obviously just becomes a really phenomenal opportunity to get involved in something like this. And are you guys taking on new investors, new clients coming in, or is it, are you capped at the moment, or how's that work?
No, I mean, we're always welcome to new investors. We're the tricky part with us, and sort of the $1 million question that I often get is, how many deals are you going to do in a given year, or when's the next project? And to a large degree, it's somewhat beyond our control, right? Because we have certain fairly rigid underwriting criteria that we look at when we assess a particular market or actual site for an acquisition. Mm-hmm. So it typically means that in a given year, we'll only do maybe between 5 to 10 projects. And it's really depends on the quality of opportunities that we see. Having said that, we always want to make sure that we have a sizable investor base, and we've grown primarily over the past nearly 20 years just through word of mouth. People have invested, they've had a good experience, introduced their family members or colleagues and so forth, and really kind of grown organically that way.
Right.
So by no means are we ever capped or not looking for new investors. Really, the tricky part is trying to find the right opportunities.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, it's crazy. Do you see? I mean, I know the answer to the question, and I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot. I'm going to ask it anyways. Obviously, with the single family stuff, it's gotten a lot trickier for builders and developers to do stuff because of the HST, and there's just not enough juice in the project. Because I talked about this before. Like, unfortunately, like you're negative. I think it's like 21% roughly before you even put a shovel in the ground on a single infill project in Ontario right now. Do you see any issues with that moving forward with the condominium developments or with the townhome developments?
Yeah, the economics are always hard to. 9 times out of 10, truthfully, when we're passing on a project, it's usually on that basis. We might love the site or the partner that we're working with. It's just given the land price or what you have to get fairly aggressive in your modeling and what you're going to sell homes for and what you're going to pay to build it. We don't like reaching like that. We don't like being aggressive in our forecasts. So we're fine to let deals go by. We'd much rather be patient and wait for a project that has a lot of margin from the get-go.
Yeah.
Really, it in the last little while, it's kind of forced us to sort of look further out in the time curve, right? So it means that you're buying land or looking to acquire land that is not already approved, right? A lot of times people will say, hey, show me your shortest project. I want a 2-year deal or 3-year deal. And given the sort of the size and the scale of the developments that we do, to get a project that short, you have to be buying a land has all of its planning and approvals of work done.
Right.
And that it's a short timeline. The flip side of that coin is that you're paying top dollar for those lands. Like that's fully baked in price. So you don't give yourself any juice to squeeze on land appreciation, right? We look at a lot at acquisitions where you might see land that's approved residential land in the GTA, call it $2 or $3 million an acre, probably conservatively. We're looking to buy land for maybe $1 million, where you might need to do 4 or 5 years of planning and approvals of work with the city or the region to get to a point where you can stick shovels in the ground, which means that your project's maybe going to be 7, 8, 9 years in duration. But that just gives you more time to really, benefit from passive appreciation in the market overall. It gives you a bit better margin of safety on the downside when you're locking in a lower land price. So really, it's become tricky. There's more players in this space. It's definitely harder to pin down acquisitions than it was, 5 or certainly 10 years ago.
Right.
But it's just kind of changed where we look for in terms of where you can still find value. And a lot of our investors over time have, funnily enough, sort of stopped asking for those 2 or 3 year deals and now really get excited for the ones where they're 7, 8, 9 years, because they understand that your risk return trade-off is fundamentally much better.
Right. Any time that's happened in the past where those ones that take like the 7, 8, 9 years where they actually end up just not moving forward, or that's never been a problem?
I would say the closest that we've ever gotten to that is a short answer. The closest that we've ever gotten in our portfolio is a development that we did in 2 stages, or 2 parcels of land that we bought up in Colgan, which is sort of the northwest part of the GTA, for those that are probably unfamiliar with where Colgan is. And it was a bit of a challenging planning process with the city. And when I say city, it's probably more accurately a township.
Right.
It was just a bit tricky going through the planning work there. I mean, ultimately, we were successful in getting all of our approvals and planning work done. It did cause a delay in the project, probably for about a year and a half. In hindsight, the benefit of a year and a half later pricing compared to where we would have been has far, far outweighed any penalty in terms of time for our investors. They're going to, even on an annualized basis, they're going to far outperform their initial expectations. So, there's definitely nuances with different regions and municipalities. Dealing with the city of Toronto is a bit different than Durham region or smaller areas outside of the GTA. So, but that again comes down to kind of careful underwriting at the outset, right? We underwrite really in conjunction with our developer partners, and we look at the partners that we work with are ones that have a lot of experience in this area. It's been around 10, 20, 50 years in some cases, have done many different types of developments like this, and really it comes down to being able to identify what the risks are. Are they manageable? Are we potentially being compensated enough for those risks? And that all sort of factors into our go, no-go decision when we underwrite.
Yeah, no, that's why I always laugh. Like, the government complains there's not enough housing, It's like, you guys have made your own mess of this to create not enough housing. It's not like the fact that it's overinflated from a pricing standpoint. It's because you guys don't know what you're doing. But that's a whole different conversation, which we're not here about for today. So we're going to leave that one off to the side because we could probably talk about that for hours. So with the, things getting a little bit harder in the GTA as far as these development sites that go, do you see you guys maybe more in a direction going down in the States and looking at doing more stuff down there? Not maybe necessarily just the rental income ones, but actually going into full-fledged, condo development stuff.
Yeah, I think it's certainly where a lot of growth is ahead of us. Years ago, the U.S. would have been maybe 5% of the portfolio. It's closer to about 20% now. So we're still, I think for the little while, going to be still kind of weighted heavily towards Toronto and the GTA. It's our backyard. It's where our relationships are with our developer partners. But there's certainly more opportunity in the U.S. If you look at, there's probably 15 or 20 cities that would be of interest for us for the asset class that we're doing on the multifamily side.
Right.
It does take some time to kind of get an understanding of those markets and get boots on the ground to find the right sites. So I do see over time that maybe moving from 80-20 to maybe a bit more even balance there.
Right. Okay. Cool. No, I mean, I think again, it's just such a neat way to invest. And one of my best friends in Vancouver, who had sold his business 8-9 years ago, got bought out and started doing this kind of style of investing with what you've been doing in the States more so than in Canada, with doing the multifamily, and a lot of it down in Texas and Dallas and in the Houston area, and he's just done phenomenally well with it. So. I think it's just such a great idea and such a great concept. And again, you think about like 25 grand. I mean, it's not small, but it's not huge as an initial investment to get involved in something like this. And then I'm assuming, if you have no immediate rush for the money, you can just take that 25 grand and then move it from one project to another whatever money you made from one to the next, just keep building it up. So then you're getting a higher and bigger return every single time.
Yeah, that's a lot of what our investors do is they'll spend the first maybe 6 months or a year with us getting their portfolio built over a number of projects. And then fast forward a number of years, as the products start to finish up and turn over and pay out, it becomes almost like a recycling and a reinvestment exercise where it's okay, I've got paid back from this project. I'd like to kind of redeploy it maybe now into 2 different projects, given that it's grown. So that's, you kind of hit the nail on the head with our typical investor profile.
Okay, listen, I know you're a busy guy and I don't want to keep you any longer than this. And I really greatly appreciate you coming on today and giving us some great insight into what is, I think, a phenomenal opportunity and is a way to diversify yourself for sure. So if our viewers who are watching this, they want to reach out, and are they okay to contact you and see about getting involved? Yeah.
Yeah, you can either email me directly, just at barry.mccullough@greybrook.com, or easier to email, maybe info@greybrook.com if that's easier for your viewers and listeners.
Okay.
But yeah, we can speak with them, kind of answer any more questions they might have about Greybrook, and get going if they're interested.
Okay, awesome. Well, Barry, thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate your time and insight and all that amazing information. Take care, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon. All the best.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Take care.